Hello, I'm Krista McAllister, and welcome to Cerius Leadership. Whether you are growing your business, growing your career, quite possibly both, thank you for listening. Casey, I'm so excited. I'm just joined today with fractional CTO Sustainability Advisor Casey Clark. Thank you for bringing your unique perspective on technology and AI to our discussion today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Kristen. I'm excited about this topic today. I think we have, lots to talk about as there's so much that's changing with AI coming on the scene and technology starting to be much more aware of their carbon footprint and other sustainability issues.
Let's jump into that a little bit. And I love when you and I first met, we were talking, I said, what are you
Mhm.
passionate about? And I think 20 minutes later, you went, okay, I can take a breath now. It was clear. And I've had a number of guests with various aspects of their expertise with technology innovation and AI. And I know that there's so many ways to approach it. And you certainly are coming at it from a unique view as a tech expert, proponent of it, and a sustainability advisor. What are so the conversations in the communities for corporate social responsibility and sustainability? What are the hot buttons right now on the topic?
Well, certainly the hottest button is artificial intelligence. And there's a whole camp that thinks that bigger is better, and they're on the quest for artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence that's out there. But, it goes beyond AI into, people are becoming much more aware of our overall carbon footprint, our energy footprint, what's going on with e-waste, how are we consuming water? And it's just that AI is in this hockey stick of how much we're building out data centers and the real impact it's going to have, and how can we as organizations make better decisions on how we're deploying tech. But certainly AI was the trigger for me after spending many years helping organizations get into the cloud and figure out their IT strategy and how they can grow and become more innovative, from the digital point of view. At this point, I, with AI, really needed to take a step back and say, are we really making the best decisions? Can we do everything that we want in innovation and still take care of the planet? So that's what was my trigger.
And I've been hearing that more as to that quest for people, planet, and profits. You
Hmm.
kind of get those. And normally the first thing that everyone's thinking of any board, any leadership team is how are we deploying our technology, the innovation, how's it going to make us more productive? What I've never heard in a conversation until we got to know each other was, okay, wait, how much energy are we consuming? What is the carbon footprint? Are we measuring that? That's not showing up in the KPIs. Let's start with how do you go about measuring or helping companies measure what their total consumption is or that total impact?
So let's start at the beginning at looking at what's going on in the industry and the overall carbon footprint. And a few figures from the US. I mean, right now, data centers in the United States consume, have a greater carbon footprint than the airline industry, believe it or not, and we're growing much faster. So, energy consumption, a typical cloud data center, a couple of years ago was using 1 to 200 megawatts. The new AI data centers that are being deployed right now are 1 gigawatt, 2 gigawatts. There's a new 2 gigawatt from Meta. There's a 1 gigawatt one from another large tech company outside Memphis that um, is expected to double in size. And the biggest ones that they're projecting out, and this is, from some of the big AI companies, is they want to go for 5 gigawatt data centers, northwards of 20 or 30 in the AI race right now. Well, 5 gigawatts would power Miami.
Wow.
They're putting them in clusters. And, you know, there's just not enough power on the grid right now. So most of these data centers are being built primarily with natural gas uh, generators built right next to them, or they're being built right next to nuclear power reactors. One large tech company has a big deal with turning 3 Mile Island back on, which has been mothballed, for the last 5 years. So, the energy is spiking. There really aren't a whole lot of controls around it. Mostly it's local communities, battling the tech companies as to whether or not they're going to be planted there. And there really needs to be a more organized, fashion. So, but you asked about what can individual organizations do to understand their own carbon footprint that's out there. So there are some great tools. Your chief sustainability officer or your CFO can use some of the tools that will calculate for your own data centers. They have connections into the various power utilities, such as Eversource and others, and they can tell you how green your energy is and how much your data centers are consuming. So that's one way to start within your own data centers. If you have workloads deployed into the cloud providers, each of them have a carbon footprint tool. And you'll find that each of the regions that you're deployed to, whether you're in US East, which is primarily in Northern Virginia, or you're in Eastern Canada, the green footprint that you'll find will be very, very different. Running your workloads in Scandinavia, it's almost all green energy. Running it in Northern Virginia, it's only about 12% green. Running it in Poland is pretty much all coal-fired power plants. So by using the tools there, you'll be able to understand at least the carbon footprint you'll have for those workloads that are out there. And there are some better and better tools that are coming online now for that. Mm-hmm.
Using that lens of being more efficient with
Mm-hmm.
it, and leveraging AI or the computing power for it, what's another lens or another approach to aligning, here's what I need for my business, yet here's how our environmental goals. We've got our
Mm-hmm.
business goals, our environmental goals. How are we aligning those and marrying them together in a more efficient way versus just bigger and better?
I think every company needs to start with what's their utilization. So go in and talk to your chief architects, your CTO, your head of operations, and you can calculate the utilization of all the servers and the storage and how much energy they're using right now. On average, and I've worked a ton with large financial services firms across the globe, on average, they're using about 10% of what they actually deployed, including workloads that are in the cloud. So start out and go, do we actually need to be running all of this? Or if I've got dev and test systems, do I really need to run those overnight or on the weekends? So there's a whole new movement out there for light switch ops, which means if you don't need it right now, shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
So start by thinking about, do we need to be active across 2 data centers? What is the real requirement out there? Do we really need all this data online? Could we shrink it down to just the data that's required for records retention and compliance? So
Mm-hmm.
start with shutting off, right sizing, particularly in the cloud, and then start looking at your application portfolio. Do we really need some of those old apps around? Can we archive the data and shut them off? So efficiency
I
really
love it.
starts.
It's like cleaning your house every
Yep.
every year, going through your closet. When's the last time I wore this? Is this out of style? I'm gonna put it in the back.
Hmm.
And just recycling and with, I think house cleaning is what you're doing, is going through
Absolutely.
our entire tech stack, because we forget how many individuals in the company, sometimes we don't even know, have just grabbed that app and they put that $10 a month on their credit card.
Hmm.
And we're just not even aware, it's not on the list of our tech stack, and really understanding what are our teams using, how are they using them,
Hmm.
and do we have maybe some legacy stuff sitting around that we just don't need anymore.
Yeah, or are you keeping, log files online that you don't need? Is there, a lot of data kept in databases that could be archived? And not only is this going to help your carbon footprint, it's going to help your bottom line. You're paying for things, particularly in the cloud. You're paying for every byte of storage and every server minute that you have out there on virtual machines. So FinOps and GreenOps actually go great together.
Well, it's easy in a physical standpoint, looking at, we used to have all the file drawer, the file cabinet upon file cabinet. We would have storage spaces, and then after 7 years, you could shred and it was gone. What's the equivalent in, all that data that's archived and sitting there? And we think, well, it's not taking up any space in my office. Why don't I just keep it for 15 years of archived data?
Or do I really need to go through my email box and get rid of those 10,000 emails that I haven't actually read? Digital
Yeah,
litter.
maybe 50,000. Some of our email boxes be way worse than
That's
that.
so I want an AI tool that actually follows me around and learns about what I'm actually going to read and then goes back and cleans them after me. That- They are out there. I just have to find the time to go implement them. Well, I think as corporations, we actually have much more than that. I've had clients that I look back and they've kept daily backup files for every server going back for 2 years. And I'm like, when's the last time you went back and had to restore one of those?
Mhm.
Well, we might need it. Okay. How often do you go back a year? Is that data even valid anymore? And that's just storage. That's digital litter at this point. And it's so easy, for us to just keep accumulating and accumulating, whether it's in our own data center or it's backups in the clouds or it's in Iron Mountain, um, and making decisions of, we don't actually need to have that is a real tough decision for a lot of organizations, but it's kind of like cleaning out your basement. It feels so lightening and energizing when you can actually do it.
But, and it's true because it's not something that I see. I can walk by a file
Mhm.
cabinet. I can walk by a closet that I
Mhm.
can't open anymore because so much is shoved in there. How do we have this conversation with our teams? If I'm a CEO or CIO, I'm looking at this growing tech portfolio, which even the archived information, even though it doesn't seem like it's taking up space,
Mhm.
it's taking up space in our environment. What are the first questions I should be asking my teams when we're looking at utilization and cost of what we're using? What does that conversation look like?
Mhm. So in talking to CIOs and CTOs, many of them have not been involved in the sustainability discussions. They may be asked to provide data, about buildings and about operations and that sort of thing, but it really doesn't go much further than that. With those tech leaders, I usually work with the business to start with why. Why is it important as an organization to be aware of our energy footprint, our carbon footprint, what's going on with e-waste, what's with the storage, and get them inspired, that they can really do something about this, that they have an important role to play so that if they get inspired, they're going to inspire their staff to be more efficient, to be more conscious of this.
Mhm.
Because it really is about, doing well while doing good. You are taking care of the planet. Now, to the leadership of the organization, getting rid of managing things that you no longer need or dropping, paying for storage that you got rid of the data for, that really helps hit the bottom line as well. But I always start with inspiration and to get people on board and to think about the perception that they'll have in the market when they're much more corporately, responsible. Particularly with millennials and Gen Zers, the next generation, sustainability and taking care of the planet and being conscious of climate change is very, very important to them. That's why people go to the effort of becoming B Corps. Um, so start with why, and then baseline where they are. Looking at their data centers, looking at old equipment that's still running, but people don't know why. understanding, things like water for cooling. How many liters are you actually using? You know, we're currently on a trajectory, particularly with AI right now, of, a typical 100 megawatts. And this isn't the, 1 gigawatt or the 5 gigawatts. A 100 megawatt data center will use 2 million liters of water per day for evaporation cooling. And this is all fresh water. It's drinking water. And if you think about the number of data centers that are being installed, in places that are already under stress, but get them involved, measure where they are right now. And the data is not that easy to get, unfortunately. And, you know, looking at it, not only what you're doing yourself, um, for your own carbon, that's operational emissions. But you have to look at the embodied emissions. What were the emissions of your suppliers? So the chip makers that are out there, the actual production of the servers, and calculate it all together. And as I said, there are some good tools that are coming out now that help you do that. And then talk about, where do we want to start? Do we want to start with carbon? Do we want to start with our application portfolio and see what we can shut off? Can we look at our sources of energy? Can we switch? Can we convert, which is actually a pretty easy conversion. If we've got backup generators in our data centers that run on diesel, can we convert those to biodiesel? It's an easy switch. Most of the backup generator suppliers already support that. And that will lower your carbon footprint and get you on a better trajectory that's out there. So looking at carbon, looking at water for cooling, looking at what's the overall footprint. And then you have to start looking at the equipment that you're managing. Currently e-waste is incredibly on the rise. We were generating internationally around 34 billion kilograms of e-waste back in 2010. By 2022, it had risen 82% to about 62 billion. There are estimates right now that by 2030, we'll be at 82 billion kilograms of e-waste out there. And it's got to go somewhere. And there's, most machines are not being designed to be taken apart so we can pull out all of the rare earths and the minerals and the gold and the platinum and everything else that's in there. So in looking at the equipment that you have internally, can you extend the life of some of the machines you have right now? Because that's machines that you don't have to recycle. It's, retaining them longer. And then thinking about the circular economy, how can you ensure that it's actually being recycled properly, or it's being repurposed and given to a nonprofit organization or other company that can use it? But being very conscious of our own footprint of the equipment, particularly in the age of AI. If you think about all the NVIDIA servers that are being deployed right now, and the generations that are coming out very quickly, all of that is going to become e-waste within 5 years. And that's probably extending. It's probably going to be closer to 3, considering the high level of demand and the growth and the bigger is better crowd in AI. What are we going to do with that?
New is better. I want the latest thing. What are we doing with? I love again, back to the house cleaning and how just either in your offices and your own, how many old laptops do you have?
How many old phones?
that can be wiped and they can be repurposed.
And right now, only about 22% of it's being recycled, and most of that is out of Europe. We're not very good about it here in the US.
So when you look at, most of us, our companies don't have data, though we're connected to data centers, we're using the cloud on any number of apps that we have. Most of our consumption is it's the screen, it's the laptops. With some of the newer hardware that's coming out, is it being designed to be more efficient, or is it just more of the same? Is there that cost benefit?
believe it or not, the newest generation of NVIDIA, every time they have a new generation, this newest one that is actually 30 times more efficient than the previous one. But the number of calculations that they're doing for generative AI and some of the data science we're working is escalating so much faster. We're going from, 100 million, several hundred million parameters in ChatGPT to now we're about 1.8 trillion parameters that's fired all together. So as fast as we are making the machines that run AI and many other types of servers more efficient, we're actually growing our digital footprints and our AI footprints so much faster.
Okay.
So
One
we
is
all
not balancing out the other.
no, it is not, unfortunately. And we've got, the more we are making things more efficient, we've got what is it, the Jarvin's paradox out there. We're
Mhm.
actually using them much more, just like our phones. They're becoming more and more efficient, but we're doing so much more with them, and there's so many more of those devices out there.
Going back to, you had mentioned something a little earlier that I think when you look at a lot of small to mid-sized organizations and the
Mhm.
impact that they can have or where they can get awareness, you mentioned B Corps. Can you
Mhm.
talk to that a little bit more and kind of the origin, the purpose of it, and where you're seeing companies go with that?
So becoming a B Corp is really a commitment, not only to your own organization, but to your customers and to the planet. It is a fair amount of work to prep there. I just went through a training with a good friend of mine not too long ago, and I'm actually speaking a couple of times this summer about sustainable IT, for some of the green champions over there. B Corp is that designation is really a signal that company organizations are committed to doing good while they're doing well. And it's actually a really attractive thing uh, for, as I said, particularly the Gen Zers and the millennials who are coming after us. They want sustainability. There's a great book that just came out called The Demand Revolution that a consulting firm out of Europe did a whole research project about sustainability and found it was in the top 5 criteria for people making decisions, buying decisions, particularly in later generations. And they classified the different types of buyers that are out there. So, sustainability and doing things like becoming a B Corp is becoming more and more an attractive aspect to how businesses and individuals make buying decisions out there. And again, that's growth. That's right to your bottom line is becoming more attractive in the market.
What do you see as the future of sustainability in tech? Just look at the next 5 to 10 years. Are we
Mhm.
headed in the right direction, or do we need some kind of a wake-up call?
I think we definitely need a wake-up call. There's a lot of denial and unfortunately a lot of greenwashing out there. There was a study that was done a couple of years ago with an organization that I work with, sustainableIT.org, that 65% of CEOs believe their companies are guilty of greenwashing. And now in this country, we have a fair amount of green hushing going on as well. So
I'm going to
I
need
think
you
we're
to define that real quick here, because I'm a greenwasher and I'm just not as familiar with some of these terms.
so greenwashing is people concentrating on the good side of the reports, like they're meeting their net zero, but at least reducing their carbon footprint with things like carbon credits as well as renewable energy contracts, which are in some other part of the world, not where you're actually using the energy.
Mhm.
The cloud providers are particularly guilty of this. But on the other hand, Amazon is the biggest purchaser of green energy on the planet. So it's in greenwashing, it's have you made your reports that go into a lot of investor reports that go out there? Are you really being truthful? Are you going down to the location? And, are you getting the level of data that you need? And are you trying to make up for it with carbon credits or other types of contracts out there? So the greenwashing is, let's really own not only where our carbon footprint is, but what's the variability on it. And to be honest with your investors and your employees and your customers. The green hushing is where a lot of companies are, because of a fair amount of political pressure right now, are pulling out any reporting of sustainability going out there.
I
And
see that happen
that's,
less. Okay.
yeah, and as well as even Europe has pulled back on some of the reporting requirements, CSRD as well as CS triple D, were new reporting requirements coming out of the EU. And they've pulled back, so it's only organizations of 1,000 people, it's 1,000 employees or more that have to do it right now. So there's a pushback in reporting
Mhm.
sustainability and climate impact and environmental impact right now. But the climate is still heating up. We just had a whole raft of, tornadoes and hurricanes in the last few years. It's important that we all take ownership for that.
Looking at that from a company leadership perspective, what's
Mhm.
one step that a company can take, let's say this quarter, to begin improving the sustainability of their tech operations? What would be
Mhm.
your one to two key pieces of advice?
Everyone has workloads in the cloud right now. And just getting in and looking at the carbon footprint tools from your cloud provider, and many, even smaller organizations, have multiple um, deployed clouds. Look at what your carbon footprint is right now. The tools are readily available. There's nothing new you have to install.
Mhm.
And get an understanding of where you are. Look at your energy bill, from your data centers for the workloads you have running there. And go in both of those platforms and look at your utilization rate. How, how much of the CPU power, how much of the memory are you actually using, or what's just running? And so there are simple things we can do to right size servers that are way overpowered. A lot of companies, including a bunch of them that I worked with, just lifted and shifted their workloads and sized their virtual machines in the cloud similar to what they had in their data center. It's not necessary. I was working with a client not too long ago, and they found out that their utilization was about 7.5% of the CPU power of everything they have running in the cloud.
It
It's
harkens me back
mind-boggling.
to the ERP systems that we
Mhm.
would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on and then only use 10% of its capability.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Mhm.
I
Database servers are
get it.
particularly guilty, but you have to look at your memory. But yeah, look at just start out with energy consumption, utilization. What's your carbon footprint right now? Everybody can do that with the tools that are available um, right at your fingertips. Mhm.
I love that. And the exercise of going through what are we currently using?
Mhm.
What are we using it for? And is there anything that we're paying for
Mhm.
that we should not be using because no one has used it in years? And
Mhm.
if you just, it sounds like if I just follow the payments or where the plugs are right now, is this being used? It's a real low tech way to
Mhm.
start following that trail. Casey, thank you for sharing your passion. And clearly, I know you've been on some panels recently. There's a lot of
Mhm.
discussions. You're certainly helping to spearhead this conversation and making it part of, whether it's the strategic planning meetings or those tactical meetings as to how are we going to deploy that, asking, wait a minute, what's the impact? What's the carbon footprint? Let's baseline this here. And is
Mhm.
there a more efficient way of going about it? Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing your expertise.
it's easy for any organization to get started and to really inspire your staff. Everybody feels good when they're helping the planet.
And it's not a cost cut. This is not cost cutting. This is a sustainability initiative
Exactly.
and
Oh, and it's
understand.
going to help your bottom line too.
Who's going to argue with that? Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Serious Leadership. And for anyone listening, if today sparked a new idea or gave you something to take action on, don't let it sit. Share it, use it, and keep growing. Until next time, keep leading with clarity and confidence. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much
much,
for,
Leslie.
yeah, thank you. It was so nice to be here and with you, Kristen. Mhm.
Take care.
You too.